I do.
You may stand.
Stand. I would just like to say that I maintain my innocence.
Well, please rise. I am now going to pronounce the sentence. With the jury having found you guilty of all three counts that you were charged with in your indictment of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and solicitation to commit first-degree murder, I am going to adjudicate you guilty of all three at this time, and you are going to be sentenced as follows. As to count one, the first-degree murder count pursuant to section 782.04 and 775.082 Florida statutes, you are sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of release or parole. As to count two, you are going to be sentenced consecutively to 30 years in the Department of Corrections for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. As to count three, you are going to be sentenced to 30 years in the Department of Corrections consecutively for solicitation to commit first-degree murder. The credit for time.
On November 6, 2023, the jury's verdict echoed through a Tallahassee courtroom. For the first time, the power behind a murder was laid bare. The man standing before the judge, once a respected dentist in South Florida, the brother-in-law of the victim, was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation. Moments later he heard his sentence. Life in prison, plus decades for the additional charges. But this moment of reckoning did not come out of nowhere. Before the gavel fell, there were whispers of resentment, a fight for two young lives, and plans that were wrought in shadows. To understand how a custody dispute over children morphed into a murder-for-hire plot, we need to go back to a summer morning in 2014, when a law professor parked in his driveway never knew how close he was to the storm. In the summer of 2013, Dan Markel, an accomplished law professor at Florida State University, stood alone in the quiet of his driveway, the morning sun overhead, his two young sons safely dropped off at preschool. His life appeared stable, a respected career and academics prestige, a father's routines. Then came a divorce that would unravel everything. He had married Wendy Adelson, a clinical law professor, and together they shared two sons. The divorce finalized, but the agreement left unresolved tensions, primarily whether Wendy could move with their children to South Florida, closer to her family. Markel opposed the relocation. A judge sided with him. The division was not just legal. It fractured a family's sense of identity. In the Adelson household, the notion of family meant connection, influence, the comfort of place. Wendy's father-in-law would later call the dispute a long and terrible ordeal. Then came the sibling, Charlie Adelson, brother to Wendy, son of Donna Adelson. A prosperous dentist known in social circles and in his own words, a man used to getting things done. Yet behind the veneer of success and family dinners, the custody stalemate cast a shadow, one the Adelsons refused to recognize publicly. Investigators later concluded the division of the family boiled over into an arrangement no one expected, but many would look back on and ask, how did it all go so wrong? As Markel returned home on July 18, 2014, he pulled into his garage, his sons safe elsewhere, the morning's task still incomplete. Within minutes he would be gunned down, execution style, 2 bullets to the head. It was more than murder. It was the final chapter of the battle for control. Why would a father lose his life to a court's order over where his children should live? Because for some, the negotiation ended in one final, devastating transaction. In the next part, we will pull back the curtain on how those negotiations became a contract.
Well, this is why I'm saying it. This is why I'm saying it. I give you money. You talk to him on the phone. You go and give me. And you stay. And that just goes my head fucking stay. So it comes up to you. Tell them how the night day, officer. Listen, if they want to charge you with something, charge me. If not, I don't talk to you.
In the summer of 2014, hundreds of miles south of Tallahassee, a quiet meeting took place inside a Miami restaurant. It wasn't business. It wasn't friendship. It was a conversation that would connect a suburban dentist to a murder on a college street. The man at the table, Charlie Adelson. Across from him, Katherine Magbanua, his ex-girlfriend, and the woman prosecutors say linked him to the hitmen. The plan had already begun to take shape, buried in phone calls, cash transfers, and code words. No one in that restaurant knew they were being recorded. Weeks later, that trail would lead straight north, to a rented Prius, a quiet neighborhood, and a father on his way home from the gym. Every mile driven, every call made, brought them closer to Dan Markel. What started as frustration was now a transaction. And the cost was a man's life. Investigators would uncover that the payment for Markel's death was about $100,000. The names behind that money were not gang members unknown to the victim. They were family, ex-girlfriends, insiders. Katherine Magbanua, the link between the killers and the Adelsons, once dated Charlie Adelson and had 2 children with one of the hitmen. Luis Rivera, the co-conspirator who later testified against his accomplices, remembered the cash. The dentists, he called them.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
He was gonna give me some money. He said, take a ride with me over to Tallahassee and I'll give you some money.
Did he say how much?
At that moment, yeah, he did. 35.
All right, 35 what?
35,000.
You were going to get $35,000 for this job?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And did you have another conversation in the car on the way to Tallahassee?
Yes, ma'am.
How many trips did you make to Tallahassee?
Like twice.
All right, and were both trips with Mr. Garcia?
Yes, ma'am.
Was anybody else in the car on either of those trips?
Not at all.
All right, tell us about the conversation on the way to Tallahassee. Was this the first trip or the second trip?
This, the first trip.
All right, tell us about that.
We were just taking a ride up there. My concern, I thought we were gonna go rob him. So,
Say that again?
and my concern, I thought we were gonna go rob him.
You thought you were coming to Tallahassee to do a robbery?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you assume that, or did somebody tell you that?
No, I assumed I'm like, it was just a job.
All right. So you knew it was a job in Tallahassee, and you assumed it was a robbery. Did you learn something additional about what it was on the way to Tallahassee?
Yeah, and the way coming up, like halfway there, he said we're gonna have to kill the man. For some
Said you were
kids.
gonna have to kill the man?
Yeah,
And what was the second part of what you said?
for some kids.
For some kids. All right, anything else? What did that mean to you, kill the man for some kids?
That's for a lady. I guess the lady wanted her kids back.
All right, so is this Garcia telling you this?
Yeah,
Did he have any information about who it was you were coming to Tallahassee to kill?
if you had information for who we coming to kill,
Yeah.
yeah,
What information did he have?
he had a piece of paper.
And where was the piece of paper?
He had it in his hand at that moment.
Okay. Did you see the piece of paper? Did you see what was on it?
Yes, ma'am.
What was on it?
A picture of the guy, what's his name?
Dan Markel,
Dan Markel.
the guy that y'all ended up killing.
Yes, ma'am.
That's the leading judge?
Overruled.
Is that the person whose picture was on the paper?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And was there anything else on the paper other than a picture of Mr. Markel?
I think it was the address in it too.
Okay. And who was doing the driving on this first trip?
He
Rivera
was.
described how the money was packaged, each $1,000 bill stapled together. He said the killers and middlewoman split the payment after the deed was done. What investigators found next were phone records, rental car logs, GPS data, threads of a web woven months before the shooting. The narrative that emerged: Charlie Adelson, ex-girlfriend Magbanua, hitmen Garcia and Rivera, and the family's motive rooted in custody, relocation, and control. Markel's former in-laws, the Adelsons of South Florida, were no strangers to power and position. The fight over 2 young boys and where they would live escalated beyond lawyer letters. It reached into the streets of Tallahassee. And when the money changed hands, the distance between family dinner and murder distance grew infinitesimal. From cosmetic dentist to convicted killer. From brother-in-law concerned with children's welfare to man paying for a man's death. The deal was done. But the story was far from over. By 2016, the investigation into the 2014 killing of Dan Markel had stalled, until the investigators turned to sound. A law enforcement bump, in which an undercover operative handed a piece of paper to Donna Adelson and triggered a chain of phone calls, became the turning point. The family thought they were anonymous. They were not. Wiretaps captured code talk, conversations about tenant, investment paperwork, the TV, all under the radar of ordinary life. Jurors were shown hours of wiretap audio, transcripts, rental car logs, GPS maps. In the recordings, Charlie explained to Magbanua that if you were in the car alone wasn't enough. They have to put you at the scene at the date. The investigators had done just that. The car, the scene, the date. Between the bump, the calls, the meeting at Dolce Vita and the chain of money, the narrative emerged. Charlie Adelson, the alleged mechanism, had sought to tie the loose ends together. A coded language of tenants and paperwork masked what was really at stake. Yet the microphones heard it. A family fight became a murder for hire. And the evidence? It whispered. Until one day the whisper became a confessional roar. Through the recordings, investigators pieced together the chain. Charlie Adelson was the contact between the family and the killers. Magbanua arranged the logistics. The hitmen, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera, carried out the plan. And the money, wrapped in $1,000 bills, moved through Magbanua's hands back to Charlie's circle. Investigators had waited nearly 2 years for something they could prove. Now they had a voice. They had a meeting. They had the whisper that tied the family to the crime. In 2022, federal agents moved in. Charlie Adelson was arrested in his home. The same home where he'd once hosted parties, where his dental trophies lined the walls. He told officers, "This has to be a mistake." It wasn't. After years of secrets, it was the sound of his own voice that brought him down. Not DNA. Not a confession. A whisper caught on a wire and a mother's panic that could no longer be hidden. It took jurors just 6 hours. On November 6, 2023, almost a decade after Dan Markel was shot in his driveway, the man accused of ordering his death finally heard the words he had evaded for years.
Now it's the sentence. With the jury having found you guilty of all 3 counts that you were charged with in your indictment of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and solicitation to commit first-degree murder, I am going to adjudicate you guilty of all 3 at this time, and you are going to be sentenced as follows. As to count 1, the first-degree murder count pursuant to section 782.04 and 775.082 Florida statutes, you are sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of release or parole. As to count 2, you are going to be sentenced consecutively to 30 years in the Department of Corrections for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. As to count 3, you are going to be sentenced to 30 years in the Department of Corrections consecutively for solicitation to commit
For investigators, it was the end of a 9-year pursuit. For Markel's family, it was only a fragment of justice. One piece of a story that had stretched across states, courtrooms, and generations. The prosecution laid out a chain of events as methodical as it was chilling. A bitter custody fight. A family unwilling to accept a court's decision. And a man, a brother, who used his money and charm to turn resentment into murder. Charlie Adelson will spend the rest of his life behind bars. His appeals are pending, but his conviction for murder, conspiracy, and solicitation stands. Donna Adelson, his mother, now faces her own trial. Arrested in late 2023 as she tried to board a one-way flight to Vietnam, she's accused of helping plan the murder that destroyed her family. Katherine Magbanua, Charlie's ex-girlfriend and the link to the hitmen, is already serving life. Sigfredo Garcia, the gunman, is serving life as well. Luis Rivera took a plea deal. He will one day walk free. Wendy Adelson has never been charged. She continues to live in South Florida, raising her sons, the same boys whose custody battle started it all. Dan Markel's legacy lives on through the Markel Act, a Florida law designed to protect grandparents' visitation rights in the wake of tragedies like his. Each year, his friends and students gather to remember him, a man who believed that law should heal, not destroy. But this story, the story of a family's control, of whispers turned into bullets, remains one of the darkest in Florida's history. Some wounds heal. Others echo through every call, every message, every silence that came too late.